application development in the business school at the University of Texas here in Austin, which is where I am today. I live in Texas. But then I kind of mostly self-taught myself how to like write apps and started my career as an Android developer. I went to a basically self-taught boot camp for 3 months in New York City about a decade ago, and then got hired into Etsy to be their first Android developer. And then,
Etsy is my neighbor right now. They're like 3 blocks away from my house.
oh wow, are you in New York City?
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they have a big office there. I left before they moved into that office. But anyways, yeah. Yeah, so I worked at Etsy in New York for a couple years and then did Android dev, kind of at a couple startups and stuff for about 5 years. Just how I got to know the Cash App team, actually. So then when I was looking to move out of doing mobile work, Cash App team was hiring for a couple positions, and one of those happened to be on their custodial Bitcoin wallet. So I started working on a Bitcoin wallet in 2018, and then pretty quickly got hired by Blockstream to work on Lightning about 5 months later. So went straight to the top, so to speak, in terms of working on Bitcoin and Lightning. I've been at Blockstream for over 4 years now, and one of my projects is doing dual funded channels on Lightning, which we're very close to getting that become officially part of the spec, which is cool. I saw that it was in the future of Lightning stuff. The dual funded channels is my project, as well as like a lot of my stuff is around opening channels and how you manage liquidity with liquidity advertisements. And then there's a new proposal that I'm excited about getting into Lightning soon around how you advertise your fee rates. So yeah, that's my history and my background. Oh, I also run, about a year ago, I started teaching the Bitcoin protocol kind of as a side project at Base 58. And I also started running conferences around the same time as a way to tell more people about Base 58 and kind of get students more connected to businesses in this space is like why I could run conferences. So we ran our first conference in Austin in June, and we're doing our second one next week in Mexico City. So if anyone's in Mexico City and wants to stop by, send me your email and I will make sure you're on the invite list so you can come check out all the cool stuff that we're going to be talking about. I'm really excited about this conference. The focus of it is, my conferences are, quite technical. I can also post the, let me see if I can find the schedule for it. I just posted.
Yeah, I added the Eventbrite that you have, but of course, Lisa will make sure that you get a special invite if you are at all able to come to Mexico.
Yeah, come hang out. And
they're very technical in a good way.
Yeah, we do great stuff. I'm gonna post the schedule just in case you want to take a peek at what we've got on our schedule this year.
And Lisa, it'll be in Spanish, right? The conference?
Some parts will be in Spanish. Some of them will be in English. It's going to be mixed. I think the majority will probably be in English, unfortunately. The reason for that is we decided to make the focus of the conference on-chain privacy. So we invited a bunch of protocol devs who work on CoinJoin implementations, etc., to come give talks on how their protocols work. So if you want to learn about on-chain privacy, this would be hopefully a really good event. So that's a little bit about me and the things I've been working on. Also post the Base 58.
So this is in Mexico, December 9 to 11.
That's right, yeah. And if you're there a little bit early, I'm doing a in-depth protocols transactions class starting Monday to Thursday, which we're pretty low on attendance, so if a student wanted to come to it, just send me your email or something. You can reach me at Niftynei@gmail, and I will get you info on how to come to that class too. I think that's my email. Yeah. Anyways, so I do a lot of education and classes and stuff. We just released tickets for our next one in Austin. But yeah, that's what I'm up to. Anyways.
So I want to dig in a little bit more when you can you please explain to them a little bit more about why you came up with the dual funding spec? What happened? Like what made you go down that rabbit hole and try to change it? And then if you can, obviously the bookkeeper plugin so that we can know like what you've been up to recently as well. It would be great to understand how this affects accounting and whatnot.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so my history with Lightning is I started in 2018 and then went to one of the very first, basically the second spec meeting that ever existed with all the people talking about how Lightning works. We have meetings about every year and a half at this point about how Bitcoin Lightning spec should work, if that makes sense. My proposal was that we wanted to add something to the Lightning Network that would create a decentralized marketplace so anyone could advertise that they have Bitcoin that they want to put into a channel with you, and anyone could look through the marketplace and then in a very decentralized way directly connect with the people who are advertising that they had money they want to put into a Lightning channel. So that was my very first project. In order to make that happen, though, we had to change the way that Lightning opens work, which means that we had to change the way that you do like a, I don't know, open channel in Lightning, basically. So I wrote a protocol with some help from my friends at Blackstream and across the spec stuff called Open Channel 2. And Open Channel 2 allows you to basically gives you the kind of open channel negotiation that you need in order to in order to allow someone to sell you inbound liquidity on Lightning, basically. So inbound liquidity is a very Lightning level problem. Doesn't exist in the rest of Bitcoin, but yeah, so the cool thing is it's very decentralized. There's no middleman. You find someone you want to buy liquidity from and you pay them for it. And then together, the protocol lets you build a transaction with two or multiple parties. You could have a bunch of parties opening channels all in the same transaction. But it's done very decentralized. A lot of coin joins and stuff these days require a central coordinator who gets paid. In the Lightning spec that I wrote, there's no central coordinator. So there's no one central person getting paid, which means that they're super private. And to date, I have no idea how much Bitcoin has been allocated to Lightning with them because there's no way for me to know that because of how decentralized it is. So
that's a good thing.
Yes, it's a great thing. It makes it very hard for me to brag about what I've contributed though, as the builder.
We'll brag for you.
Yeah, you can't be like, I think sometimes something like, so some other protocols that do similar things but that are centralized would be, an example would be the Magma channels from Amboss.space, or the centralized party there is Amboss and you pay them a fee to help you sell your liquidity to someone. Another one that's a centralized coordinator and you rely on the centralized coordinator to help make the market is Lightning Labs Pool. Both of them can say we've allocated, X number of Bitcoin through our project because they're at the center. They get to see all the money that flows, all the deals that get made on their platforms. The Liquidity Ads project doesn't have that. We don't have a central thing. So it's very Bitcoin. It's very decentralized. It's very good for the long-term health of the network, I think, to have this protocol available, because if, centralized coordinators could go away or get shut down or get censored, but the government could come after them. But when it's part of the protocol, that means that there's no one person you can shut down to make it not possible. You'd have to close down the entire Lightning network to make it such that no one could advertise their liquidity anymore. So it's much more, let's say, cockroachy, like a cockroach.
If they want to go see it, where do they go and use your protocol instead of somebody that is some other option?
The one downside right now is the only Lightning implementation that lets you use it is you have to be running core Lightning. There's currently a project to add it to LND as well as to async. So there's a possibility within a year you'll be able to see it. But someone built a browser so you can look at all the current
nice
ads that are available that you could go and buy and see what people are offering. Oh wow, it looks like it's like there's a whole 2 pages now. You have to scroll. You have to click load more. It used to just be very small. So if you use Ride the Lightning on top of Core Lightning, you can also see all this information.
Got it.
But this is all public info, right? So they're
Yeah.
just reading all the gossip and showing off all this stuff. So
And then tell us about this Bookkeeper plugin.
yeah, so part of right, so this kind of all fits into the story of the sorts of stuff I've been working on in Lightning over the last few years. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would, maybe about 8 months to a year to write this plugin for Core Lightning. So again, I work on Core Lightning. Most of my stuff is, at this point, Core Lightning only. But on Core Lightning, one of the problems with Lightning is when you send and receive sats, at some level, it would be really nice to have really detailed accounting of where you're spending money, when you're receiving money, where you're earning sats, where you're losing sats, if a channel closes, how much you end up paying on-chain for that. On a channel-by-channel basis, how much money are you spending to open the channel, close the channel, how much have you earned in routing fees through that channel, where are you earning routing fees, etc. So all that data is really hard to get, I think, sometimes, depending on what Lightning node implementation you're running. So the Bookkeeper was my project to really build a data, I like to call it a business intelligence warehouse for Core Lightning. So it's a separate database that keeps all of this data. So as your node is operating, every time money moves, your Core Lightning node creates a little event that it shoots off called a coin movement. So it's like, hey, some coins have moved. Let me let you know. So then Bookkeeper is I wrote a separate application that runs alongside Core Lightning, and it ships with Core Lightning, so it runs by default. Yeah, so as your node is just doing its thing, it's off-putting all these events, and so we have this little data warehouse which collects all those events as they get emitted and writes them down into a separate database journal, and then we created a couple of commands that you can use to inspect all the data and see new information about your node using all this information that we're collecting and doing some calculations about how much money you've spent on chain for every channel, if you do a rebalancing and you pay to rebalance, we'll track how much you pay in rebalances. I would say it's pretty primitive right now. It's all the data you would need to build really nice graphs about where all your money is. We haven't built the graphs yet. So all the data is there. It's also got some really cool stuff. Sometimes when the channel gets closed, it's really hard to see the resolution of where all the little transactions are on chain that your channel close is created. So we have a really nice inspect command that you can give it a channel ID, and it'll show you all the on-chain transactions for that channel, and you can go look up information and see how much each of them costs you in on-chain fees. So when HTLCs fail and you have to pay fees for each of them, you can more easily inspect what's going on with all that stuff. So yeah, it's basically right. So the point of writing all that is okay, now you have this way so first project I did was the liquidity ad stuff. So now you have a way to get paid to sell your Bitcoin to someone else as inbound. Now you need something that helps you make decisions about where to put that money and how much you're earning from where you put your money, right? So step one was build liquidity odds, which lets you take Bitcoin that you own and sell it to people who want to be able to receive payments. Step two is to build this Bookkeeper plugin, which now gives you really good information about how much money you're earning off of what you sell to people, right? So it keeps track of if you sell liquidity, it'll tell you each channel how much you earned, plus how much you earn on routing fees through all your channels, plus how much you're spending to either rebalance your liquidity or on-chain fees, so to speak. So it's right. So now you have all the information in theory. It's very raw data right now. There's not a lot of really good. No one's really built the business intelligence graphs and stuff on top of that, but hopefully soon.
That's what it was, Will.
Yeah, Bookkeeper's only been out for a few months. There's some really cool stuff coming with Core Lightning in terms of being able to build apps on top of Core Lightning using some stuff. So we're slowly getting to where you're going to have, we're moving slowly, but Core Lightning hopefully will be a really good platform to run a business off of. So one really cool thing you can do with Bookkeeper today is export a CSV, which is a list of all the money you've earned and spent, and it'll only be it'll trim out. So like Bookkeeper collects a lot of data about you moving money around between different channels inside your node. But there's a command, it'll print out a CSV that trims out any internal transfer, and it's only money you earned or lost. And then you can upload those CSVs to something like a service like Coin Tracker, for example, or Coinly. It prints it out in the same format that they'll understand, and you can directly import it into like a tax tracking app that'll tell you what your profit loss was on all of your Lightning stuff. And so that exists today. You can use that for tax time.
So you said step 1, step 2, what's step 3?
Step 3 is for people to use the Bookkeeper and figure out good algorithms for deploying capital, right? What makes you money, what doesn't, how do you make advantage of that? One thing I'm working on right now is so my next project, the next thing I've been working on, well, currently I'm working on running a conference and getting funding to interoperate with another implementation. So I've been kind of distracted the last few months, unfortunately. But my next project that I want to do, so the one I proposed at the last spec meeting that we had in May, would be to change the way that you advertise how much you're charging for your liquidity that you have in your channels. So when someone routes a payment, how much you get paid could be more variable. So step 3 is giving you more tools to control how much you're able to make off of liquidity you've already deployed. Step 1 was how to deploy liquidity. Step 2 is how to keep track of all your payments. Step 3 is giving you better tools to make more efficient use of the capital you've deployed. Anyways, that's what I've been working on.
Amazing. Thank you, Lisa. Well, we already have a few people asking questions here. One of them is Luis is asking, what language did you use for Bookkeeper and which type of database?
Yeah, so Bookkeeper is built into Core Lightning. It's actually written in C because that's the language we write things in Core Lightning, or I write them in Core Lightning. I think you can do stuff in Rust now, but I don't really know Rust right now, so I just did it in C. The database you can actually use, so Core Lightning ships the ability to either use Postgres or to use SQLite. And the Bookkeeper plugin gives you the same options. So you can, if you're running on Postgres, it'll use this Postgres database. If you're running on SQLite, it'll create another little SQLite database. One little project I'm supposed to get done before the end of the year, I don't know if that'll actually happen, is make it such that you could keep all your data in the same database with your Core Lightning stuff. I don't know if you'd really want to do that because you probably have different backup stories, so to speak, about them. But one of the really fun things about building the Bookkeeper, though, was there's a lot of new and interesting questions about how to do accounting for Lightning payments, so to speak. So I got to make some decisions about how we were going to account for things. I think one of the more interesting, sorry, this is a little off topic, but one of the more interesting questions is, when do you consider a payment settled? Do you consider it settled when it goes to the channel and you've received a pre-image for it? Or do you consider it settled not until the channel closes? So why is that? Well, one way of thinking about Lightning channels is they're batch payments, right? So you kind of batch up how much you've spent or earned in a Lightning channel, and then you don't have an actual amount of sats until you go back to chain, right? And there's always a possibility, based on the way that Lightning channels work right now, that when you attempt to go to chain, something could go wrong. So you could accidentally publish an old version, and then you wouldn't get the amount you were supposed to, or you could publish the wrong version and your channel peer might take all your money. So the way that I ended up dealing with it is I said, okay, as soon as a payment is done, we'll consider it final in the Bookkeeper. But if something happens on your way to chain, then we'll just say that you lost money. There was a terrible accident and you lost some Bitcoin, or there was a terrible accident and you earned some Bitcoin you shouldn't have. And the Bookkeeper keeps track of that and makes an entry that records what happened, and like you have the ability to go and look at the transaction and see. But it makes it, I think, a lot easier to think about Lightning payments as like being final when they happen. And then if something happens on the way to chain, then you just have like a loss or a gain or something that's like separate. That way you kind of also, like I said, you have this nice separation of when you sell items, like when you sell things, you want to say you got the money for something you sold at the time that you received that lightning payment instead of waiting until the channel closes, because if things go wrong, it's like which of those weren't finished, etc. So, um,
I think we have two more here in the chat. Since you
okay.
have development experience, do you think you can make an application or a game with full economy based on Bitcoin with Lightning, like the current ones with fictitious currencies?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I think like one way to think about this is like, so there's Thunder Games, right, which builds a service that lets people who are building games have the tools to integrate lightning payments into their games. So when you
I'm
win or
playing solitaire.
yeah, okay, yeah, I haven't tried it. Maybe I should. I don't know. So my biggest question with this, so like right now when you build a game, right? An application or a game, right? Right now when you build a game, the nice thing about being able to use an in-game currency, right, that like only exists inside the game, is that you as the game creator get to decide what the supply of those items are, right? So you can hand out organically tokens and stuff to people in the game because you kind of create them and you create an artificial scarcity, right, as the game creator. The thing about Bitcoin is it has this natural scarcity globally, right? So it's like globally scarce. So if you want to hand out or use Bitcoin as an object that people get in the game, then the game is an entity in the global game that is like the world, right? So if you think of the game as a player, like the people who run the game as players in the global Bitcoin economy, they need a way to convince people to give them Bitcoin that they can then hand out inside the game, right? So there's like this real world cost to acquiring that asset that you give people in the game. So unless you're able to figure out a way to earn Bitcoin in the real world that you can then give to people in game, it's going to be expensive. I'm not sure how Thunder Games does it. I would assume there's some relationship to advertisers. Like advertisers pay you money and then you hand out tokens for things. Bitcoin is tokens.
There's
But,
a lot of advertisements. So
right.
possibly.
So where's that money coming from? Maybe it's coming from advertisements. So I think that's like I think that's one of the challenges of using Bitcoin for virtual applications or games, etc. Is like something that you hand out. It's a
So
long
here's
answer.
another question. Isaac is asking, what happens if accounting people want to integrate Bookkeeper to their systems? Do they have to do it through CSV files?
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways you could do it. The CSV fails is probably might be the fastest way depending on how, so this is going to totally depend on what your accounting system looks like, right, and how it works. One way that you could do it is you could write your own version of Bookkeeper, which I'm not sure I would recommend because it wasn't the easiest thing to write, that listens for all those events that Core Lightning puts out and just automatically, as soon as an event happens, integrates it into its like thing. So you could do that yourself. Another way you could do it is you figure out how to call RPC calls onto Bookkeeper. It's not released yet, but my coworker Rusty is working on this like new way of you can write SQL queries for Bookkeeper data and send it over to something that we call like an RPC to Core Lightning, and then it'll execute the query on the database and return the results. So we're basically making it such that you can write custom SQL queries on your Bookkeeper data over the RPC. So you could have an application, all it needs to do is be able to call the Core Lightning RPCs. There's a couple ways to do that. My favorite is something called LN Socket, but there's
Can you
like
put
also
the text on it where we, like if we wanted to find it?
LN Socket. I'm not sure. This is all really like kind of, there's also a gRPC thing, which I'm not sure, also gRPC, which I'm not sure is like fully fleshed out. We might have a REST RPC soon, but yeah, basically you could call the Bookkeeper commands and it returns JSON, so you can just pull JSON out. Yeah, like I said, I don't think there's no really, like making it real time it's not really architected in a way to make it nice and real time right now. But You could probably you could figure out a way to fetch data every hour or something and update your accounting. I don't know. Depends on how fast you need your accounting stuff to be updated. Maybe every 30 seconds. I don't know. Um, anyways, yeah. So it's possible.
And so the final question on my side before I let everybody ask you questions would be, I mean, these are the things you're working on. Is there anything that in the space that you admire what they're doing and you wish got more attention? Like if you could multiply yourself and help that person work on that project, which project would it be that you love and that you like are featuring or cheering for? Which one would it be?
There's two, I think. One, I don't know that. Well, three, four, no, three. Okay. The top one is probably the project my friend Dustin is working on for splicing. This is like a really cool way to make it such that you can take Bitcoin that's in Lightning and move it around to other channels in really cool ways, like really I don't want to say seamlessly, but like in like one transaction, you could move money from one channel to another. It makes your Bitcoin liquidity that's in Lightning channels a lot more flexible. So instead of right now, you have to use one transaction to close a channel and then another transaction to reopen another channel. There's no way to really move money between Lightning channels dynamically. This is the thing that'll let it be that you can put money into Lightning channels, and then at some point in the future, if you want to just rearrange your money, you could rearrange it in theory all in one transaction, and so you could move your money to somewhere else really easily with all your channels and keep your channels open and still keep processing payments while it's opening. So I think it'll make Lightning liquidity a lot cheaper to move around, which is really important for the health of the long-term view of the network, is that it needs to stay cheap to move Bitcoin around between channels. That's one project. The other project that I think would be cool just to work on is this project called trampoline payments. I'm not 100% sure how they work, but what's cool about it is it lets you kind of not know exactly how to reach a destination. And so you can say, I want to pay this person, and I want to pay this person over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bundle up. I don't know how to get to them, but I know how to get to this person. So I'm going to make a payment and I'm going to send it to this person. And then they're going to figure out how to take my payment and finish it to the end. So I think that's what trampoline is. I could be slightly wrong. This is like built by Async, who's a French team. I think they proposed it. And the reason that it's important for them is they're really a mobile wallet team. They think a lot about the spec and how it needs to work for mobile players to have Lightning nodes. And for a wallet on a mobile phone, you don't want to have to know what the whole network graph looks like. It'd be nice if you only know a couple nodes that you could send your payment to, and they would know the whole network graph or more of the network graph, and they would be able to complete payments for you. So it's like it's kind of this cool, like, pass the ball and get them to send it kind of thing, which is fun.
Who is working on the trampoline thing that you mentioned?
I think T-Boss was doing it for a bit. It's been on my radar to make it. He needs someone else to implement it in a different thing. So it would be really cool if someone wants a big project to work on in Core Lightning. It's actually one of the cool things about trampoline payments is I think you could implement it as a plugin, which means you wouldn't have to change the Core Lightning code. You could write it as a separate new application and get it to work that way. And that way you don't have to changing the big code base always takes more time than writing new code. So it's kind of a cool new code project.
Wow. Okay, so those were two.
Yeah.
You said three.
I did. I haven't to remember what the third. The third one is there's this project that Renee Pickart has been working on about how you make payments called using a pretty old, well-established algorithm called min-cost flow. So Rusty's been working on a project to add a way to make payments in Core Lightning that does min-cost flow. I don't think he's finished it. I think we've got an intern that we're going to get started working on it at some point soon. But what's cool about that is it really changes how your node figures out how to send payments over the network, and ideally makes it such that it makes more efficient use of the existing liquidity in the network to make payments. So hopefully your payments get more reliable, is my understanding.
Got it. Okay, so I think I asked enough questions. Anybody else? I know Nelson and Luis and Josue, maybe Carlos, who wants to go ahead?
I have a question for Lisa.
Yeah.
Drogos in El Salvador, we have been working in different levels. First, Bitcoin course. Second, the Lightning course. And the next step is create something to the Salvadorian people. Is our goal. The question is, in base of your experience, what is your advice to us to create a strong base of a project?
Mm. Could you say the question again, but in Spanish maybe? I would.
En base a tu experiencia,
Mhm.
¿cuál podría ser para nosotros el consejo ideal para poder crear una aplicación con una base fuerte
Mhm.
en Lightning? O sea, que iniciemos con buenas prácticas desde el inicio.
So I think what you asked, if it's okay, I'm going to check that I understood. How do we create an application that has like a good base, that you're using good
Yes.
practices, like development practices?
Yeah, with
And
like what you do with Base
development and
58.
infrastructure.
How do we connect the students with learning
Infraestructura
and
también.
possibilities that are like learning by doing versus like just talking, right? Like what do you do at Base 58 that potentially we could also, either learn from you or collaborate so that we can make sure that the students are getting the best possible experience?
Yeah, so Base 58 as a class and as an education project is the homeworks are very hands-on. So the stuff that you do is very tangible, but it's also very powerful because it lets you basically learn how to build Bitcoin transactions by hand, right? So it really empowers you as a Bitcoin citizen to understand Bitcoin transactions when you see them, and hopefully debug any Bitcoin transaction problems that you have. It really helps you to understand what Bitcoin scripts are because you write them. You write your own Bitcoin script, you write your own transaction, you learn how all the parts go fit together into a puzzle, and you learn that both by me explaining it as well as you like completing homeworks, right? So that's like
How long is the course?
It's 6 weeks long. The first 3 weeks are up on Udemy. I haven't run a 6-week version since August, which I guess is getting farther away every month. So yeah, I've been trying to pivot to doing them as like 4-day in-person classes. I'm gonna run my first one next week, so we'll see how that goes. As an experiment, it might be terrible and I might never do it again. But we're gonna do one in Mexico City where I'm gonna try and teach the 6-week class in 4 days. We'll
Wow.
see. Yeah. It's like 18 hours of content and I'll take some stuff out and get it down to 12. But yeah, that's the one. That's the transactions class. That's the first 3 weeks. So that's the first half of it. There's another half of it that I have videos for, but I haven't put it up yet. So that's all about transactions. Yeah, but I think to answer your question about the base of things, so my career and like my way of doing things and my way of like advancing myself through different projects and things is always to find a very small kind of specific thing that I want to try to do and to start with like fixing something or changing something in the way that it already exists. So I think my suggestion would be not to be too ambitious at the start. Like it sounds like you want, I mean, it depends on your experience, how many applications have you written, but I think starting small and start small with something practical that would help you in your life, if that makes sense. So, you know, as a Bitcoiner, maybe that's like doing something silly, like writing your own transaction parser is kind of one of the things we do in Base 58. Well, do we? It's like an optional thing. Or maybe you learn how to, like for Lightning, like maybe it's like, you know, getting core Lightning with Bookkeeper and figuring out how to write a little app that lets you figure out how much you've lost and earned on Lightning. You know, it's just like, I think like, you know, small things that make it such that your life on Bitcoin is easier, or you have a more tangible understanding of what kind of challenges there are with like using Bitcoin, etc. And hopefully, like once you've done a few small projects on like Bitcoin or Lightning, then when you like, then when you start looking kind of bigger and broader, you'll have strong understanding of the fundamentals and of the challenges, and that'll hopefully give you insight into how you can put skills to use. Also, like if you start small, you get practice doing things and you learn what you're good at, what you're not, what you need help with, and what you still need to learn more about. And kind of, just grow small, like slowly, rather than, I mean, when I first started out, I was very ambitious. It was like, I'm going to change the world with like shipping a thing. And, that never really, those sorts of things are hard to be successful on and have like measurable progress to show people, I think.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Marina, I would like to ask something here. I'm checking the last link that you shared, and I see that there is a certified Bitcoin professional exam preparation course. Do you know which entity or which company does certify Bitcoin professionals?
No, I wish Base 58 would certify people. We should ship a certificate. So when people take our class, you get a certificate, because I think our class is worth 10 to 100 times more any of those other certificates
We're going to talk to Lisa to make sure you guys get a discount later.
Yeah,
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Those other classes with certificates, they're tapping into your want for a certificate, and you're paying them for it, but I'm not sure it's worth your money. So I have a lot of faith in my stuff, and if you go through a Base 58 class and are able to finish the homeworks, you know more than 99% of most Bitcoiners. I would say even of people that do Bitcoin dev regularly. Like the Base 58 class is very good. But I've had people go through it who wouldn't consider themselves technical, and they finish all the homework. It takes them a long time, or longer than maybe someone who does know more about programming, but they finish it, and they come out of it really a lot smarter about Bitcoin than most people. And the cool thing about the class is that you don't even know that you've learned as much as you have, because it's very, we do building blocks, and so everything seems very obvious. And then when you get to the end, you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's cool. But you don't realize you've learned as much as most people, more people have, I think. I mean, maybe not, I don't know, but yeah, people
There's
really
very good things about it, people.
Yeah.
So, and I met Lisa. I know how tough she is about these topics. She really wants to make sure that you learn for real, not just that. Well, that's why she's our final Mastering Lightning speaker, people.
Yeah. I'm
that's
curious.
Why she's our rock star today.
Yeah. So you guys this is a chain code class, right? Like
it's based on the methodology. We are independent. Like, as you know, what they like is to make sure that these programs are being built in different places. But we just thought that El Salvador needed a course specifically for the country, because we were having trouble with companies who were there but kept on telling us that there's no talent. And obviously we have 23 people connected here today, and definitely the talent is here. The average is 2 years of coding experience, and that's obviously there's people with 30 to 40 years of coding experience, a few that are relatively new in the space. So the experience is varied, and obviously the focus when we do the fellowship will probably be about 8 students out of the total. So they all know that this will be a very rigorous program coming up. But we did proof of talent and proof of work, because most of them have gone through both courses, and each course is 6 weeks long. And as you know, it's a lot of homework. It's not like easy necessarily, but we don't teach them how to code. We really just go through the information, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. It'd be really fun if we could get people maybe into Austin, or I guess Mexico City is probably too soon to come meet people. But
when is Austin?
Austin's
the visas, right? Maybe
for the last week of Mexico's next weekend. The Austin one is the last weekend in April. Austin's just more expensive. That's the problem. Anyways. Yeah.
Well,
anyways,
there's a question. What do you think is a developer profile to begin learning in Lightning? Well, as you can tell, you can be a Spanish and Portuguese major that delves into the world of
Yeah, so I think it depends. Lightning has a lot of different things happening across the things. So I think it really depends what your interest in Lightning is. Are you interested in Lightning because you want to help people accept Lightning payments? Then being like a web developer is probably gonna be one of the like strongest things that you can help out, right? Like building user interfaces for interacting with Lightning payments, or maybe you're a mobile developer that wants to build an application that help, helps people send and receive Lightning, right? So you could be a mobile dev who wants to build an application that lets people see their Lightning balances or connect to their node. You could be someone who wants someone to help them. So yeah, so maybe you're like web dev skills, maybe you have mobile skills, maybe you want to help people run a node, and so you're building an application that's like on a desktop or a website that helps them see what their information is on their node and how to like move their money around. Maybe you're more interested in protocol level stuff. Maybe you're interested in routing algorithms. So you're more of like a computer science nerd. So you would want to get involved with like this project about like min cost flow algorithms or trampoline routing as a project. So I think there's like a new thing going on right now with like spam prevention and how to keep the Lightning Network from falling over if someone tries to spam it. So like, are you really interested in how networking works and you want to work on protocol development, how do nodes talk to each other? There's like all these different places where I think you could get involved in Lightning. It really depends how you want to contribute. Do you want to contribute to people who are using Lightning at the user layer? Do you want to contribute to how Lightning works at like the payment level with like writing routing algorithms? Do you want to contribute to how people earn money with their Bitcoin? Maybe you work on like building better accounting tools so people can decide how to better take their Bitcoin and put it in Lightning. So that's a long answer, but I think I'm trying to just point out that there's a lot of different opportunities, and it's really going to depend on what you want to contribute or how you want to see Lightning evolve, right? So, yeah.
Lisa, I have a other question. What is the reason? Because the most application in Lightning are web application and not app application.
Mm-hmm.
There are a specific reason. It's more easy to develop in web application, or what do you think?
I think that most developers who want to build applications have a strong skill set in web applications, and they take these strong skill sets of web. Also, the other thing about web applications that I think makes it really seductive, so to speak, for building Lightning applications is that in theory, the users that can use your web app is very big. So the distribution, the number of people that can click on a link and open up a web page and be using your app is much, much, much greater and much, much, much likelier to happen than someone downloading your thing and installing it and running it on their machine, right? So using the browser as your interface, like as your user interface, makes web application development for Lightning projects, I think, very attractive because of how many people can potentially start using your project right away just by clicking on a link or something. So this is my understanding of what's going on there, but I think that's what's happening.
Leonor, Salim, Josue, anybody else?
What questions do you guys have about how Lightning works? Have you guys learned everything? Is there anything you've learned so far where you're like, this doesn't make sense? Why are we doing it like this? Or is there anything where you're like, Lightning's not good? Do we have any Lightning is not going to work? Lightning is a failures in class? That's there's always one. Sometimes Lightning's terrible. It should die. Or Lightning's a failure. I feel like I see that on Twitter every once in a while. Everyone's like, Lightning doesn't work. And I'm like, okay.
Lisa, protocols as RGB and Taro, there are different goals to the Lightning, or this protocol are using Lightning like a base?
No, so here's the thing. RGB, as you call it, and Taro, don't need Lightning. they could exist without the Lightning Network, right, as protocols. So you'll notice that when, for example, Taro was launched, the things in the announcement email for Taro were all something called BIPs, right? Bitcoin Improvement Proposals. That's because Taro, as a protocol, is done at the level of the Bitcoin UTXOs. So like Taro is actually a protocol that fits inside of layer 1 Bitcoin UTXOs. You can view Lightning as like a way of updating information about an account or something without having to touch the main chain. So you can use, because Taro is a UTXO level accounting, it's basically an accounting scheme. I like talking about what is a, like, you know, what are you doing? Taro is a way, so an accounting, clearly I'm into accounting, I wrote a bookkeeper, right? The contabilidad, de quién es el dueño de un, ¿cómo se dice? Like, activo, asset. And Taro is a novel way of keeping, it's really, and the thing about Taro and RGB is the same. They're basically very similar, slightly different in some small details, but pretty much like the same sort of thing. And it's an accounting, it's basically new accounting books for assets that aren't Bitcoin. So you can keep an accounting record, and the accounting is there's an entity that owns it and an amount and what asset, right? So it's 3 new pieces of information that you can now use Bitcoin to keep track of. So Bitcoin is an accounting protocol originally just for keeping track of who can spend and how much Bitcoin, right? And that's all Bitcoin is. Taro takes it and adds all this new information into UTXOs, and it lets you issue new types of assets. But really, it's just an accounting record. If you issue for example, like I think someone's asking about a stable coin on Taro. So if you issue, like if I have let's say I have like $1 million and I issue an asset that represents $1 million US in a Taro thing, all that that's doing is taking what used to be like a database where I keep track of who owns what of all my money, and now it's just on Taro. The only difference now is that it's a lot more, in theory, it's a lot more transparent, so you can actually check who owns what on that asset using the Taro like data, which the data doesn't live on Bitcoin, it lives somewhere else. It's like a whole separate thing. Anyways, but at the end of the day, if my bank account got hacked and the $1 million went away, the Taro thing would never be able to update that or display that, right? Because Taro is just an accounting mechanism, and it's separated from the actual object. Like for stablecoin, for example, a lot of times you want there to be a reserve that's matched 1-to-1, right, in a bank account. Taro is just the accounting of who owns what, and it's written in ways that the Bitcoin blockchain keeps it such that whenever updates happen, no one can change them. So it's really just a very audible way of keeping track of third-party assets. But the only assets that actually live in Bitcoin for the most part are digital assets. Stablecoins will really probably never be digital assets. Like, you know, there's always going to be a bank with $1 in it to some extent. Maybe not. I don't know. Question mark. But anyways, so like if the $1 million disappears from the bank and you can no longer withdraw it, or they're still doing fractional reserve banking, then the Taro stuff won't help you a whole lot. It'll just tell you who was owed what at the time all the money got taken away and disappeared. I don't know if that's helpful. Anyways, Lightning just makes it such that doing accounting in UTXOs, so what it means to do accounting in a UTXO is every time that someone changes ownership of an asset, you have to spend a UTXO and create a new one, because that's how you track the state updates in this protocol, right? So every time I send and receive a stablecoin balance, I'd have to create a Bitcoin transaction. I mean, it's similar to Bitcoin that way. And that gets very expensive, especially if there's high fees or a lot of people are trying to use Bitcoin at the same time. So the reason that they use something like Lightning for that kind of protocol, which again, it's not a natively Lightning protocol, it's a protocol that is based on UTXOs, but if you're able to create channels instead of having to do it on chain, then every time you update a balance, you don't have to make a Bitcoin transaction on chain. So it makes it much cheaper. It's really not a very cost-effective protocol to keep all of your accounting for an asset in Bitcoin UTXOs if you don't use something like Lightning to make each of the changes off-chain, because otherwise it gets very expensive very quickly. And you have to have a bunch of Bitcoin for every time you update like a stablecoin balance. If you don't have Lightning, you have to have Bitcoin so you can make a Bitcoin transaction. So it actually becomes, there's actually like a real world Bitcoin cost to updating the balances of who owns those stablecoins with Taro or RGB, because you have to keep spending UTXOs. If you put them into a Lightning channel, then you have a little pool of those assets that you can trade between two partners without having to make on-chain transactions. So you save yourself all that money. So it's not a very scalable project without Lightning, which is why a Lightning company is probably doing it. But you don't inherently need Lightning for the base level protocol. That's a long explanation. What do I think of Lightning stablecoins? I'm not a huge fan of I'm like a little bit of like a purist. I'm like not a huge fan of people trying to use Bitcoin chain as a place to put data about other assets, like using it as a data chain for other accounting systems is like, at the end of the day, you're paying for block space, right? So if there's an application that is generating enough like external value that it's able to acquire Bitcoin so that it can use the Bitcoin blockchain as their accounting system of making these changes every time they have like stuff they have to pay in Bitcoin to change it, right? That's what it means to have a stablecoin in Lightning or in Bitcoin. It means that every time you change the state that you update who owns what, you have to pay in Bitcoin to get that change written into the Bitcoin ledger, right? So there's a real Bitcoin cost to putting a different accounting system into Bitcoin. If your accounting system, is valuable enough that you can keep writing updates to Bitcoin and you can earn enough Bitcoin through that system to keep up the system, then I think that's, there's nothing that I as a it's a free speech system. There's nothing that I as a Bitcoiner can do to prevent someone from doing that. So I don't really have like a strong opinion about it that way. Is it a project that I would try to make happen or spend my time working on? This is kind of my way of being like, what do I think of it? Probably not. I don't think I would rather spend my time, I have a limited amount of time to work on a project. So I would rather spend my time coming up with better ways to do, allocating Bitcoin into Lightning channels or like routing algorithms or building applications for people to send and receive Bitcoin payments, like Bitcoin payment rails, which is Lightning is like a payment rail system for Bitcoin, right? It's the first decentralized, trustless payment rail system that exists. I think that's really cool. And so I'm going to spend my time working on that. I don't get as excited about being able to keep separate accounting systems in Bitcoin. So I probably wouldn't work on that personally.
Are there any questions to close off? Because it's already 11 here,
Yes.
12 for you guys. So I want to make sure Lisa has a chance to get home and go to sleep. She is home probably. She just needs to go to sleep.
Work from home. Yeah, it's true. Anyways.
Maybe the last question. Many of we are developers and traditional developers. And in base to your experience, how many opportunities there are in the world if you are different skill in Bitcoin and Lightning?
I think there's an enormous opportunity to be someone who understands how these new payment systems work. I think that there's two different ways of looking at that question. The first is how much demand is there in institutions that already exist for that expertise. I think that is something that kind of depends on fads and waves of fortune and who's investing what kind of thing into how they see their company moving forward. So I think that's hard to predict, but I can only see it getting better and stronger. I keep learning about more companies that want to implement Lightning payments. The other answer to that question is there's also the opportunity for you to build something new or to find a new way to solve a problem or start up a new kind of service that's built on Lightning and Bitcoin in a way that there isn't anything before. Maybe that requires finding other people that aren't developers, that have other skills than you. So it's a little bit more of a, there's the opportunity to go work at companies that want to hire people that have those skill sets. And I think that is hard to predict. But there's also the opportunity for you to make your own opportunities in the space that's really new. I think there's a lot of new opportunities for new stuff that doesn't exist and that people haven't identified or spent time building yet. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's wide open. And the cool thing about working on payment rails is if you figure out how to make a system that is useful for people, it's probably pretty easy to figure out how they can pay you for that system, right? Because you've got, you know how to accept payment and they know how to make payments and you're making their life easier to do payment things. So, and maybe that's like part of what you could help build is figure out an easier way to pay people for things on Lightning, and part of that means then you get paid for the thing you're doing on Lightning. So, that's at least a very open answer here. I hate to box things in, but I think that the skills, if it's something, the other thing about it, right, is if you're interested in payment networks, are you interested in, global commerce? What about Bitcoin are you as a developer interested in? And I think that finding work in that, if you find work in your interesting, not just because it's it's Lightning and Bitcoin, it's cool, but find the thing that you think is really cool and interesting and spend your time on that particular part of it. I think you will have no problem finding work no matter what you're interested in. But it's helpful, I think, if you have it's always helpful, I think, when you have a particular thing that you're interested in or niche or something that you know or are good at better than other people. And I think that sort of skill is always valuable, I think. So.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. And for whoever needs to and wants to come to the conference, please text me and let me know. And I'll contact Lisa and ask her directly about that. And then we'll also ask her about Base 58. If there's any scholarships, we can try and get a few of you as well, so we can figure that out in the coming days as well. Un abrazo a todos. Nos vemos muy pronto y gracias por estar aquí. Gracias, Lisa.
Chao, hasta la próxima.
Gracias, Lisa.
Gracias.
Gracias.